the process of getting there is the thing that you love. Like it's cool to be able to be, and I mean, it's lucky to be able to get to the point where you're like, I can make a good living on this and I can have a family and I can, have a mortgage and shit like that. But like without the struggle, like you can't appreciate any of it, like that whole like playing basements to 10 kids or like even like playing shows where the only people who are watching you are the other bands, like without that struggle, like you don't appreciate the fact that like when people show up, you could just be like, oh, I actually made something out of nothing. And I think that's the most fulfilling part of the whole thing.
Hey, welcome to episode 13 of the Codec Projects podcast. This week we're talking to artist and designer Jon Contino. This is a really fun conversation. I didn't really know Jon before speaking to him, but I have been a fan of his work for a while now. We talked a lot about getting into art and using that skill to contribute to the Long Island hardcore scene, which he came up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he's still contributing to this day. He explains his journey to become an in-demand artist and designer who's done work for the likes of Nike, Coca Cola, Hulu, Netflix, and a lot more. And we just get into a lot of different areas in this podcast. It's pretty fun. Hope you enjoy it.
My name is Jon Contino. I grew up in Long Island, actually, and I am a creative director and a designer, and I run an agency, a branding agency. And I spent the majority of my life going to hardcore shows.
I always feel like a lot of people are, they come from there, but they don't talk about it. And it's like, if you just scratch that one level below, it'll come out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
No,
it's dude, for me, like I like anytime I get the chance to talk about it, cause it's like one of those things, it was such a big part of my life that it's just, I have so much to say about it, and I'm not around anyone. Like you find people in pockets here and there, that were a part of it or whatever, and they get what you're saying, or they heard a Madball or something like that,
Right.
And you're just like, oh yeah, and you try to have a conversation, whatever. But like anytime I get the opportunity to have like a real conversation about it, like it was like, yo, do you remember in like 98 when something happened, and then this, and you were there, and this one all of a sudden it's just like, I don't give a shit like what my job is or where, what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just like, let's just talk about shows,
Right. It's funny because I was actually talking to the Hard Times, like the website.
Totally.
I was talking to the dude, one of the guys, Bill from the Hard Times, yesterday actually, and the fact that they've gotten so big, like on such a it's crazy to me. And I was talking to him about that. I'm like, because their stuff is pretty directed towards hardcore. Like, how do these people even understand? Because they just have this like, you know what I mean? Because it's shared like crazy. And his thought on it was, there's so many people that over the years it kind of dipped in and out, that they get just enough to get the joke,
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So I think he's right. Cause I mean, I don't know. I went to fucking Have Heart show a year and a half ago, and there was 10,000 people there. So
yeah,
dude, how does that happen?
I don't know. Like I was talking to Tom from Indecision about it too. I was like, yo, can you explain, like, what did I miss that there was 10,000 kids there? Like, because that when Have Heart was huge, was kind of like the few years where I dipped out, and I was kind of like focusing on like getting my life started and everything, and work and everything, and I just wasn't going to shows as much. And I was like, I totally, that was like that whole like couple of year period when they were like the biggest band on earth, totally missed me. And I said to Tom, I was like, well, what the, like, how does that happen? He was like, dude, nobody knows. It was like, it was perfect timing, I guess.
No, it was bizarre because the thing is, even when, like you said, like when they broke up their last show, I actually filmed that last show for Bridge 9. Like I put that DVD together, and like there was a lot of people, but I mean, it was like, I don't know, I'm not really sure of the number, but it was probably maybe 2,000, but I don't think it was even that much. You know what I mean?
That makes sense though. That's like a huge hardcore show. That totally makes sense.
That would be about what I would expect. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
right.
But 10,000, and not even the fact that it was 10,000 on one show. They played 3 shows in that weekend. You
It's
know?
insane. It's like a stadium.
Yeah.
It's like a stadium worth of people.
So it's bizarre. And, I was talking to someone else about it, and they think it has something to do with the Spotify, the way Spotify does their algorithm.
Wow.
Like they get grouped in on playlists with like other like way bigger bands like Newfound Glory or something, because they both
That's
on Bridge 9
insane.
or both have releases
Holy
on Bridge 9. So
Wow.
that might be something to that too. I don't know.
Wow, look at Spotify doing some good in the world.
Yeah, it's about time, I guess.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. I got a friend that works there, so
That's all right. They know what they're getting into.
yeah. I actually ordered your book off Amazon. I tried to get off your website. I usually try to do that because I know it's better.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Better to get a direct sale, but it was sold out, so that's good.
Yeah, it's good. It's also a pain in the ass to keep reorder. Well, I mean, oh God, I sound like an asshole when I say that, but like,
No, I hear you.
like I don't order like a ton at a time because I'm not like, I don't sell a million books,
Right.
So it's
right.
like every time I order like 30 or 50 or something like that, and then I run out, I'm just like, oh fuck, because then it's just a whole,
Yeah, and then you got to do the shipping yourself and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's still it's very DIY still.
Right. Well, that's the beauty of the direct sale. Like, just keep as much of that in your pocket as you can.
Oh yeah, dude, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you, man, it's like the it's the hardcore way. It's like I don't know, I'll never let go of that. Like, people are just like, just have someone do it. Just let this person do it. Do that. Blah blah blah. It's so worth it. But
Well,
I'm just like, I'm so used to just like packing shit myself and sending it out that it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm struggling with that myself on this doc I'm working on. I've been selling it direct, and I realized that I can only go so far with that, and I wanted to get it out there wider. So I'm talking to distributors, and I've been burnt in the past by distributors on things.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'm just I ask, I'm the biggest pain in the ass to talk to, asking every little question. But
you have to.
Yeah, you really
got to do it.
Because they're there to make money, and they don't really give a shit. They don't. I mean, most of them, I don't think, care. I've talked to a few, and I've only talked to one that I think actually watched the thing. So it's like it's crazy.
They have no idea what it is.
No. So, but dude, how is it that how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I am a month away from being 38 years old.
Oh, okay. All right. That's probably,
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I thought you were a little older, but we would have probably run into each other.
Yeah, it's
'Cause
and we
Northeast is
probably
pretty
still
small.
could have at some point.
Yeah.
I got into shows really young, so it's a possibility, but at the same time, like, who knows, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there's that gap there. That's a pretty decent gap when you,
Yeah. It's definitely. I think like your generation of hardcore kids was like that, like, step up where when we would go to shows, we'd be like, oh man, look at all the grown-ups.
Yeah. Well, now the grown-ups are like us, I guess. They're like, there's like 60
God.
old men at hardcore shows and playing
Dude, it's so
on
fun.
stage.
I went to an Indecision reunion show in like 2005 or something like that. And, it's 15 years ago, but at the same time, I was still very much an adult with like my own place and a career and the whole thing. And when I got there, all the guys that were there were like the guys who were at shows when I was like a little kid.
Right.
And it just instantly made me feel like I was like 13 years old again,
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So, I mean, I guess the most basic question is, how did you end up going to hardcore shows?
Shit, man, that's a great question. So, like, I grew up, early 90s, getting into like Nirvana and Alice in Chains, and then eventually like Metallica and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, it was one of those things when someone like hands you a demo tape and then or like a mixtape or something.
Yeah.
And I think the one that got me was the Overthrow demo tape. I don't know if you remember Overthrow from Long Island.
I don't know.
They were on what were they on? They had a record on Triple Crown, maybe.
Okay.
It was called React. But one of my good friends, his older brother, played bass in the band.
Okay.
And like the Long Island scene, was especially pre-internet, was super tight. So it was just like everybody knew everybody. Everyone's older brother was in a band. It was always something like that. And that demo was the first demo I ever got. And then another friend of mine at the same time got one of the Newfound Hope comps from some other kid that gave it to him. And then we started listening to that. And then and then someone handed me an Earth Crisis tape. It was just like, yo, you should check this out. And then that went to like Indecision and VOD and all that kind of stuff. And I started hearing about kids who were going to this place in Long Island called the PWAC to go see shows.
Okay.
And it was just like, I was like, oh shit. I was like, do like a lot of kids go to this? And they were like, yeah, man, there's always like a bunch of people. So I would try and, either, like my mom would give me a ride or I would hop in the car with somebody and we'd get driven down there or something like that. And that was, but I was also in a band too. So like I was in a band at the time, like pre knowing what hardcore was. And we were just kind of like a weird, like grunge metal band,
Yeah.
It's like we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And then, and then we got introduced. I got like the 25 to Life, Keeping It Real tape. And then it was just like, oh shit, I could play this.
Yeah.
And then we just started playing shit like that. And then it was just like, we started playing shows and and then, like as soon as like I played my first show too, it was a lot easier to go to shows because then it was just like, all right, I know what it's like to be on stage. I know what it's like to be off stage. And I'm getting this whole thing now. So then it just became like an obsession,
Yeah. You get the lay of the land and it gets a little less scary. Although, yeah, I don't know. When you're first starting to go, like we were talking earlier, there's grown men with tattoos, like
Yes.
hurting each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Long Island, I've been there a couple times for shows. I played a few times. It always seemed like more of kind of a like separated off from like Manhattan or the rest of the New York. Like it was its own independent kind of like scene. Does that sound kind of correct?
Like, the crazy part about Long Island was, and especially where I grew up, so the part of Long Island I grew up was in Nassau County. So we were closer to like the city side of the island. And there was, you could think about Long Island, because Long Island being the Long Island that it was like very different, like, so where we were was kind of like VOD was like neutral territory. So like everybody in Long Island liked VOD.
Yeah.
But then you had like, bands like Tension or Silent Majority or something like that, who I felt were like very Long Island type bands.
Yeah.
But then it was also like the bands that we were all into being like on our side of the island was like Irate and Sworn Enemy and, more of like the Queens, like Borough, Bronx type bands.
Okay.
So we, I spent the majority of shows going to like Castle Heights instead. So it was more of like the tough guy bands and stuff like that. And like the Long Island scene had a lot of the, it was more of like the melodic hardcore. And we were kind of more into like the tough guy, like ignorant, like beat each other up hardcore.
Okay.
And so we spent a lot of time bouncing between places like Ground Zero and Deja One and Voodoo Lounge and Castle Heights and just kind of like Nassau County to Queens back and forth. But like, rarely ventured into Manhattan, rarely ventured out to the east end of Long Island. It was always just like in our little 20-mile bubble is where we stayed.
Right. I mean, Long Island itself seemed pretty big, actually,
Yeah, dude. Yeah, if you wanted to go like see like an out east show, and then you for some reason you were just like, oh, let's go into the city and see a show like at the end, at the end of the night. Like we've done that, and you're talking like a 2.5 hour drive,
right,
like with traffic if you're lucky,
Yeah. I got stuck. I had a bad experience on the LIE driving. Oh, Jesus, this was I don't know. We had been driving all night and I was trying to get to a show, and I had we were in a minivan, a rental, and I fell asleep in bumper to bumper traffic. Like I nodded off for a second, and I rear-ended like a box truck. It destroyed the front of that van.
Oh, that sucks.
But that's my one memory of or my last memory of Long Island.
What a perfect memory to leave with.
That was a rough one. And then, yeah. So were you into, cause I one other memory I have of Long Island was were you ever into like skateboarding or BMX at all or anything like that, or is it all been art and hardcore?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to be a skateboarder, but I was terrible at it. But a lot of the kids that I grew up with were all like BMX maniacs. Okay. So it was just like, yeah, it was like, so it wasn't necessarily me, but like a lot of my friends were all just like constantly just like riding around on their fucking BMXs with the pegs and all that shit, and like jumping over things and knocking over garbage cans.
Yeah. Were you aware of a place called 7-Eleven, like a trail spot on Long Island? Because it was pretty well known in like BMX world.
It was called 7-Eleven?
Yeah, it was called 7-Eleven, and
I don't know, man. That's like, that might be digging too deep into the memory vaults.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure I must have heard of it, you know?
Yeah, no, I just remember one time that the 10-Yard Fight played a show on Long Island. We were apparently right up the road from it, and all these dudes showed up that I knew, that like famous, like kind of like pro BMX guys, and I was like, what the fuck? It's crazy.
Oh yeah. It's probably one of those things that like if one of those kids I grew up with was just like, yo, it was right here, I'd be like, oh yeah, you know. But like I think it might be one of those things that if you're not doing forever.
It, yeah. Plus, if you're not doing it, you're like not even
right.
It's probably just going right over your head.
right.
So how did you get? So how did you just always? Were you always just into art and stuff as a kid? Like drawing?
Yeah, it was one of those things. It came pretty naturally, you know. Like I always just like to draw, and the things that I always like to draw were just like I loved sports, I loved movies, so I would always just draw like the Ghostbusters logo, or like the Yankees logo, or the Jets, or the Islanders, or the Knicks, or something like that. So I would always just be drawing logos all the time. And a lot of people in my family are artists. Like my mother's an artist, my grandmother was an artist. It was just like it's in the blood, you know.
Right.
And
right.
My parents would encourage it because they saw that I like to do it. So I like to do it. And then, you know, you get to a certain age and then it's just like, okay, well now I like sports and now there's like girls and now there's this, now there's the other thing, whatever. And then when I learned how to play the drums, and my best friend growing up learned how to play guitar and we started with a band, then, you know, we would be recording like demo tapes on boom boxes and shit like that. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make a cover. And then it's like the bug hit me again. And that's kind of like what kicked off this whole thing. And once I was like in bands, like for real, right. I would do all our merch. I would do our demo covers, flyers. And then this is like mid to late 90s. So I would start doing websites and stuff too.
Yep.
So it was like kind of that world where it was just like, you know, other bands would always need artwork, so I would do artwork for them, and then even like local businesses and shit would need websites, and no one knew how to do that stuff back then. So It's like it didn't matter. I was 14 years old because they were like, "Can you do this?" And I would be like, "Yeah." So I would charge people to build websites and stuff like that too. And one of my biggest clients I was trying to land was E-Town.
Okay.
right yep. When the Second Coming was coming out, I was talking to Ant Money, and he was like, yo, your website's sick, can you build us one? So I was like, yeah, sure, definitely. And so they were playing in Long Island, like, I don't know, like a couple weeks after that. And the guys were there like selling merch or whatever, and I go up to them and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? I'm John, I'm doing the website. And the guys are like, oh shit, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, no, what's the matter? He's like, oh man, he's like, I heard what you went through. And I was like, oh, what'd I go through? He goes, you got held up at gunpoint. And I was like, nah, that wasn't me. So that's when I found out I wasn't doing E-Town's website.
Oh, shit. Well, sounds like that was for the best.
Probably for
yeah. So you were that guy then. You were the guy. Because, like, I know there's usually that guy who can like lay out and design or maybe like shoot photos. Like in my area, and like for us, we were lucky enough in my band. My friend John LaCroix would always do all that shit. Like, and then he was the guy who all the other local bands would come to and be like, yeah, we need a layout. Like, like that's kind of how he started freelancing.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
And it sounds like that you were that guy doing that in your area, in Long Island.
Yeah, that was there was a lot going on for a while too. Like I started working my way up because as you know, as everybody got older and people started taking the bands more seriously, you know, bands started getting signed. And it was you know, it was a way in to a lot of these like, you know, smaller record labels and stuff like Triple Crown or whatever. Like I used to be good friends with the guys from Full Blown Chaos, and when they signed to Stillborn, I was like, yo, let me do the record. Let me do the record. And, you know, like, you know, Jamie had like an in-house guy or something like that. So I never got to, but like, I was like right there as being like almost, I just wanted to be like Jacob Bannon, you know, I was like, I want that. That was my dream.
Yeah. Oh, and he was the other guy. He was like, I remember it's funny because I think him and John would go back like kind of almost compete against each other for layouts.
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Those dudes, like, I actually grew up. It's funny because I like Jake. I've never been a huge Converge fan, but I've always liked Jake. I grew up like the town over from him. So
no kidding, really?
Yeah. So and he,
funny.
yeah. So like, you know, we were always kind of around in the same circles, and he's definitely a creative dude.
Oh yeah, and you know, especially then too, when, you know, there was such a small amount of people who were actually good at it, you know, because everyone would do it, but that didn't mean you were good at it, you know.
Right.
And there was only a handful of guys at the time that were actually good at what they did, and he was one of the main ones that I loved.
Yeah, and I mean that's even true now, but at that time, like, it was, access to computers was a little harder to get the access, right. but also his stuff was a lot more kind of hand drawn and organic and painting, right. and that kind of stuff. Whereas, you know, like even I could kind of like hack out a kind of hacky like computer graphic at that point, but it wasn't. I wouldn't have considered it design, you know.
Right. And it's so funny too, like looking back on it, like there's so much nostalgia and love for like the hacky shit, because it's like you make it out of love and necessity, not because you're like trying to be something. Right.
And the fact that I could even do that much at that point was like amazing to me, you know, you know, because it was
at that time you'd like figure out how to do it though. Like my layout program at the time, because like until I got like a hacked version of Photoshop, like I was using Microsoft Word. Yeah. You know, I was just, because it had like rulers on it. So I was just like, okay, this is, if I could make an image, I could drop it into Word and then I could print it out like that. So it was like whatever you could do to get shit done is like, you just do it because it's the only way you can.
Right. And a lot of the stuff, you know, because I'm a little older, so most of the stuff that any of us would do, even a couple years before this time, it was all cut and paste stuff. It was like, you know, you like I used to have a couple just books with just different, they were like lettering books with just different fonts, and I would just like photocopy shit and then cut it out and paste it, and like, because I was always trying to make like little like t-shirt companies and stuff that, you know, and that kind of stuff. So just even super basic access to like even Microsoft Word was like would have been light years past that,
dude. And you know what's so funny too, it's like even to this day, so like now I've been doing this, like this has been my job for like 24 years now at this point, because I started like when I was in high school, I was getting paid to do this. It was just like I found a way to get paid for it, and I was just doing it, and I never stopped. But like even now, like I've done I just did some logos for Hulu, and I did it that way. Like I was copying, like I was like cutting and pasting and scanning and, you know, doing it like a hardcore flyer way, just to like do shit like that. And it feels like so fulfilling, you know, to go and just like do it like the old fashioned way.
Right. There's something about, and because I mean, I suck at drawing, I always have, but like there's something about creating something off of the computer these days, like that. It just feels more fulfilling. Like I just bought some, I haven't silk screened really in like 20 years, but I just bought like this whole little kit, and like I just want to get it and do something. Like I used to spend in high school, I'd spend hours just kind of like carving designs out of like stencils and stuff with an X-Acto knife. 'Cause I didn't even have like that photographic method. I didn't even have the access to that. It was just like carving the film out. I don't know if you've ever done that, but like,
I did. Screen printing, to me, I was always terrible at it.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that you couldn't figure it out if you had the right, I don't know, maybe just the motivation. 'Cause like the stuff you do was like, you know, a lot harder than that, I think, you know, but
it's, you know, it's just like one of those things. It's like driving a stick shift. You know, it's like if your brain just doesn't want to do it, you're just not going to do it. And you can try, but like you're never in it, you know?
Right.
And you're just like, fuck it. I don't want to do this.
But I mean, just on that note, with like a lot of the stuff you do is really like it's hand lettering. It's not like hand lettering. It is, which is a whole kind of different art form really than even design. But I mean, it's obviously related. How did you start was that just like the natural thing you started doing?
Well, that was like, you know, like when I was saying when I was a kid and I liked doing logos and stuff, I had always just been interested in designing with letters, because it always was like, it wasn't so much about like reading for me. I loved like the aesthetics of it, like how like, you know, sports teams logos were just like letters drawn cool ways.
Right.
And I even found like old sketchbooks of mine from when I was like 7 years old, and the pages would be titled like John's alphabet number 1, John's alphabet number 2, and I would just draw the alphabet in all different ways. So it was always like a thing that I was into. Yeah. And then when I was in like middle school and high school and kids were getting into graffiti, I was obsessed, you know, like just that there was so much style in it.
Right.
So I would try to do that, and I sucked at that. So it's just like, it was basically just me like trying lots of things and sucking at them until I kind of found like my place in that world. And then like even when I was a kid too, like my mom and my grandmother taught me calligraphy like before I was in 3rd grade. Wow, you know, like I just like learned how to just write. And, you know, like my mother went to Catholic school too, so she already looked like, or her handwriting looked like calligraphy to begin with. Right. So it was it was always something I was into. And then I had been doing it for a long time, and I would try to sell it to clients all the time, and no one wanted it. They were like, that's nice, you know, but no thanks. And I would like literally try to give it away sometimes, and no one would ever take it. And I had been doing it for so long at that point that as soon as like the whole kind of handcrafted movement kind of happened, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago, I already had so much work in that style from me just like loving it and just trying to push it, that when I, you know, threw up my portfolio and kind of started sending it out to people, it was like right place, right time. And I just had like the right style, and it was like the right trend that was coming around. So it really kind of picked up. And then as soon as it became kind of a thing, I was getting work from, you know, all over the place, like literally all over the world. I was doing campaigns for like Coca Cola and Kellogg's and Nike and all sorts of shit. Like,
that's amazing.
It just became like this thing. And then I was just doing it so much, I just got good at it, because I was literally doing it all day, every day for like years and years and years. And it was just, and it was never supposed to be like a lettering artist kind of thing. I just liked drawing the fonts that I was using in graphic design as opposed to just downloading fonts. Cause it was never as fun to manipulate them on the computer as it was to just draw them. Cause I knew I was going to get what I wanted if I drew it, you know? And that just kind of like it was always just a way to just put it into a design, not as it to be like the piece by itself. So I think having kind of like a true design background and then an interest in kind of customization, you know, blended together, made it kind of the perfect storm for me at that time. And I got to do it every day and get paid for it. It was amazing.
That's awesome. I mean, that is like kind of the dream in a way.
Yeah. And yeah, dude, I mean, it's like, you know, everybody's got ups and downs, and horrible shit happens and good times happen and whatever. But I'm, you know, knock on wood, I'm very happy to say that this is like I'm living like my dream life right now. You know, I got a great family. I get to do what I love for a living. And if you would have told me that this is where I would be, you know, in 20 years when I started this, I would have been like, yeah, like with what genie am I doing this, you know?
Right. And it seems like you're in a good place where you're able to still do things like you said, you know, if you're doing stuff for Coca Cola and Nike, but I also notice you're doing stuff for like Incendiary and other like, you know, clients that probably don't have quite as much money as Nike.
Oh yeah. Oh no, totally. Like that's like, I think that's kind of one of my favorite parts about. So like I never went to like a high-end art school. I never worked for anybody else. I had always just, like I said, like I have always done this like the hardcore way, and I've always basically just kind of like backed up, like ass into things, you know, or like bullied my way into things, and just have like be like relentless on people to let them give me a chance.
Yep.
And that's just kind of always how I've done it. But I just did it so much for so long that I ended up at this point where now I'm running this studio that is just like based on just doing cool shit. So like I don't have boring clients, you know, like people are always just like, oh, well, what's your boring corporate stuff like? And like my corporate shit is the same as if I was doing like a hardcore record or something like that. Like it's all just the same fun shit for whoever, you know? So like anytime I get an opportunity to work with a hardcore band, like I've done a bunch of stuff for Closed Casket. And it's, you know, it's like, it's tougher because without the budgets sometimes, like it's really hard to carve the time out of the schedule when clients are paying and calling and shit like that. But when I do have the time, like I'm all over it. And I'm like, I don't even like, I never ask for money. I'm just like, just let me do it. Like it's all I've ever wanted to do. Like, let me just do that. And when I can, I do, you know?
Wow, that's cool. That's cool. But like, it sounds like something you touched on there is basically kind of that whole DIY spirit of just not really asking for permission, just going for it, and doing it, you know, like, you know, what's the saying? It's like, it's easier to ask for forgiveness after the fact than ask
than permission.
Yeah. I mean, I think without that, like most of the stuff that we're interested in never would have happened, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always like people who are just like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Like, and there's like still, I mean, I've been doing this for so long and I've worked with so many different types of people and different types of businesses. There's always a question of, well, how do you do that? How do you get to the next level? And the only answer is you just do it. You know, you just suck it up and just start doing it. And you'll do it. And there's maybe no one watching you at first. But then before you know it, there's 2 people, and then there's 5 people, and then there's 10, and then there's 20, you know, and it just eventually you start to get there.
Right. And at first I think it could be better if no one's watching you because you're just going to fuck up a lot anyways.
I mean, I think I can honestly say that I owe my entire career, you know, from that aspect of things, you know, like my parents were a great influence. I'm lucky to say that I have like, you know, I came from an awesome supportive family and stuff like that. But I think in this conversation, I think I can honestly say that I owe most of it to hardcore because you know, when we had a band and no one wanted to book us on shows, I found a place and I started booking my own shows and putting my band on the shows, you know, and it's like anything that I tried to do to just be a part of something, if I couldn't get in, I would just make it myself. Well, and then I would just be like, okay, there it is. And that's how I've always done it.
Well, yeah. And that's kind of like, it's kind of like a dirty word in hardcore and people don't want to admit it, but like a band is a fucking business. Like it's just
absolutely, you
don't maybe realize it till after the fact, but you're running a small business and
100%.
Most are not successful businesses,
right.
But you kind of learn. And like, if you pay attention, you could take that. I mean, I'm guessing you must've taken that out into what you're doing now.
Definitely. Yeah. Because it's like all about like relationships, you know, like, if you become friends with the people who own the venue, and then, you know, like you learn about like how to charge for things. You learn about how to promote things. You learn about how to, you know, have vendors, and you learn about how to kind of like have these like contacts that can supply you with this or with that, or, you know, you learn how to like smooth talk certain people to do certain things, or how to get like a big band on a show that would normally want X amount of dollars and you have nothing, you know, like it's all these like relationships and these, you know, ways that you have to go about making stuff happen is so directly related to just like any other type of business. that if you come out of that and you like what you went through, you're already set up. Like, forget business school, like you did it already, you know?
Right. And you're definitely learning, I would say, a lot of marketing and branding.
Totally.
If you're doing it correctly. I just remember, because I worked on I don't know if you've seen it or not, but we did a Slapshot documentary I did with Ian McFarlane from Blood for Blood.
Oh yeah, I didn't see it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's tough to get your hands on just because Tang doesn't. I don't know. It's a whole nother story. It's a whole fucked up situation. But like the one of the things that I remember all the guys saying was how they were a thing before they were really a band. Like their identity came first, you know.
Yeah.
And there was this mythology about them. Before they had even played or practiced really. And so it was really like, I don't know if they were aware of it, but it was just a brilliant marketing and branding strategy, I guess.
It's so funny because they were definitely, I remember other bands like that too, where it was just like, and like sometimes I'm sure you've heard Tom's podcast, Axe to Grind too. Yeah. They talk about like t-shirt bands or whatever, like bands that like everyone owned the t-shirt, whether they listen to the band or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like these bands that had hype and kids would show up and you would be like, why do people like this band? You know, why do they show up to see this band? What is this hype about? Like, they sound like a regular band to me.
Yeah.
You know? And I was always interested in how bands were able to like cultivate this like lifestyle around their band before anyone even really, knew who the hell they were. Like, that could be, they have like a demo tape with 2 songs on it. Why do they have like a rabid fan base already?
Right. Right. I think a lot of that, it's funny. It's kind of like early influencer stuff where they kind of schmooze up to the right people and play the game and get, they'd have the right bands wearing their t-shirts on stage and so kids are seeing it. You know what I mean? Like you got, the lead singer from a popular band wearing your shirt.
Yeah.
Like, and if you have it's decently designed shirts, that's half the battle, I think,
Oh man, it really when you start thinking about how it relates to like the modern day, marketing techniques, it's just like, oh man, what did we contribute to?
No, but yeah, it's a lot of that. It's such hindsight, but yeah, it's basically just, I mean, it's nothing super. It's not really new because people have been, or companies have been doing it for years, just sponsoring, different like athletes and stuff, and that whole idea. But
it's so funny. Did you see that Jordan documentary?
I haven't seen it yet. I hear it's great, but
it's phenomenal. It really is. But like when they start talking about when Nike approached him to do the shoe and like the other companies that wanted to do the sneaker or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see that was like not really a thing then. And he was just like, oh yeah, like it's like other players like had their shoes or whatever, but it wasn't done in a way that they were asking him to do it. Okay. And then like to see what that's become and to see like besides the person, but just like how just that one product has become such a thing because of the way it was marketed and who they used to market it. And like that shoe essentially turned Nike into what Nike is just because of that one decision. And it's crazy to think about how impactful that is.
Yeah. And I remember growing up in the 80s as a skateboarder, like that shoe was hot. And I mean, it still is. But one thing today, like do you ever look at the sneakers app, the Nike sneakers app?
Yes. Yeah.
And they have that right now they're running the behind the dunk, the little little mini documentaries.
Yep.
I'm obsessed with watching those. And they talk about in one of them how the dunk just kind of came and went originally, like no one even noticed it because it just got eclipsed by the Jordan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then, I mean, now
that's crazy.
Yeah. To think about that now is crazy. And like
that is wild. not to take a quick pause here, but do you hear any background noise right now? Like a motor or something?
No.
Oh, okay. So I don't know how it is by you, but we got dumped on with like 2 feet of snow last night.
Yeah.
the plows are out in full effect and everyone's
Okay.
like going hard right now.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it slightly, but it's not anything that's like crazy. But yeah, we got the same deal. Not
Sucks.
2 feet, more like maybe a little over a foot. But
Oh man, I'll take that.
I'm not. I don't know why I live on the East Coast.
I know.
I tried the West Coast thing. It's funny. Like I was out I was out in Orange County for 3 years, and then I bailed. I was done on that, and I came back to the East Coast, and I was only gonna like kind of like check in for a minute, really, and then I ended up meeting my wife and just been here now since 2003. So
How did you feel about going West Coast for a little bit?
So, I mean, I grew up again, like just looking at like skate and BMX magazines all the time. Everything was on the West Coast. So my whole dream, my whole life was just to go out there without any real plan as to what I was going to do. But, and so like I ended up going out there with my friend Jon from the band, and I ended up getting my dream gig for a little bit working at basically just making skate and BMX videos. And then that was fun for a bit, and then it kind of fell apart, and I ended up getting laid off. And then I was gonna stay, but I was honestly, like, financially I was broke, and like mentally I was kind of broke, and so I decided to come back and hang out here for a bit, and then I just ended up meeting my wife and staying. But like the thing I thought I felt about the West Coast was it, I don't know. People say East Coasters are rude, and they, you know what I mean. But like, I feel like people on the West Coast aren't any nicer. They just kind of gloss it over, and it's just a little bit more. I don't want to say fake, but it's a little bit more sugar coated. They sugarcoat everything, and they're not as upfront about it. Whereas like on the East Coast, if someone has an issue with you, they just let you know up front. Like they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I was for a while, I was doing a lot of back and forth traveling for work, and what I found was on the West Coast, it was more about the passive aggressiveness, as opposed to like the just like in your face aggressiveness,
right?
And that was what got me, where I was just like if you got something to say, just tell me, you know, like enough of this like dancing around, like, you know, 'cause it would piss me off so much, and then I'd be like, let me just come back to New York where people will just fucking yell at me for no reason. They might fucking yell at you and spit on you, but like if you fall down, they're probably the first ones to pick you up too. Right. Time, it's like, you know, it's all very surface. It's not like layers. It's not the onion peel.
It's easier to me it's easier to figure out, but I don't know, man. The weather though, you kind of can't beat the weather. Although now it's on fire, so I know.
Yeah. Well, it's either beautiful or it's on fire. It's one of the other.
On fire, and then it's, you know, well, I don't know. New York's doing okay now, right? As far as all the lockdown situation.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit. I know we're having our peaks just like everybody else, but it's definitely better now than it was at the beginning. Like we got hit so hard at the beginning, it was like hell on earth. But like it's so funny. I was saying, my oldest daughter is almost 8. And we were talking about the snow, because I was like, I hate the cold, and I was like, I'm gonna go out to LA, and she's like, Dad, she's like, do you want the heat or do you want to get sick? Because you know, like they're getting hammered over there. I was like, yeah, you're right, I don't want to get sick.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that goes, but I don't know what they're gonna do about all the fires and all that shit.
I have a client right now that's in Napa Valley, so it's a resort, a spa resort. Yeah. And they're literally right on the edge of wine country over there, and they got hit with fires so bad. And the fire, like every day, the fire was creeping closer and closer and closer to this hotel, and they weren't open yet. Like we weren't done designing or anything. Like we were still like the construction crews were still there building out the rooms. Like all this stuff was happening, and the fires kept creeping closer and closer, and it was very nerve-wracking to see, like, was this place going to burn down or not? And like the people who worked there all had to abandon their homes because they couldn't live there anymore, because the air quality was so bad. It was just like a disaster. Wow. But luckily, like they got hit with, like, I don't know, it was like a couple of days of rain and it took care of it. But it was pretty terrifying for a while. I can't imagine living it, you know?
That's scary, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think about it sometimes. I don't think it's in the cards for me because there's just so much family here right now. But
Yeah. Right.
I'm definitely not a winter. Like I'm the one. Like everyone else goes skiing. I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay home. I'll sit this one out.
I'm gonna stay home and put the heat up to 82, and I'll talk to you when you get back.
Exactly. So I gotta ask you though, like, what's it like? So you said working for all different types of clients is like, working for like a Nike or a big client is not much different than working for a smaller client. I think I misunderstood what you said there, but I can't. I mean, maybe just the act of the physical work. Is that what you meant? Like just physically doing the work because you're able to do what you want to do for the most part? Is that?
Yeah. But like when it comes down to it, like, and at least in my experience, I think maybe because of the way that I built my career, it doesn't matter who the client is. Like literally, I could be doing a T-shirt for Incendiary for free, or I could be doing like a campaign for like Hulu or something like that, and it's the same. Like there's sponsors involved, and there's maybe there's like a board of directors, or there's this or that or whatever. But like at the end of the day, like everyone's just looking for the same thing. Everyone's just looking for something cool that will put a smile on their face and that will kind of speak to the message that they're trying to send. And the only thing that really changes is the amount of money that's involved and like who's paying who and how important it is that there's a return on that investment and all that kind of stuff. But like really, like it's all like the process is exactly the same no matter who the client is. Like everything is just and for me, I just love doing it. And to be able to bounce back and forth between like small clients and big clients and stuff like that is it keeps it fresh too. It doesn't turn into kind of like you could be doing the greatest thing in the world, but if you do it every single day for 20 or 30 years, you're just like, all right, maybe it's time for something else,
Right.
But being able to do that keeps it pretty fresh and keeps it exciting every day.
Right. And I have to imagine that if someone's coming to you for a design job, like they're coming to you because it's you. So you have a pretty specific style, and with any luck, they're not coming to you saying, "Hey, we want this." That's totally something. They did describe this thing that's not even stuff that you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
right.
And
I mean, I can only think of one time that's happened to me in like the past 10 or 15 years, and it was for a Nike project. They were doing like a Kyrie Irving thing or something at one of the stores in the city, and this digital marketing agency who kind of had no idea what they were doing somehow had their hands on this event, and someone from Nike was just like, call John up and get him to do whatever. But they were just like asking me to draw like some like superhero like Marvel type shit, and I was like, I am not a comic book artist.
Right.
Like I can't draw that. Like it's not gonna happen. I was like, let's figure something else out. And it took like a minute to explain to them that like not every artist or illustrator or designer can do every single style, and that's like not the point,
Right.
So that's like really the only time I can ever think of it. The rest of it is all like people have seen it or word of mouth, and they know what they're getting when they reach out to me. So that's actually like the best thing about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have a specific style, so it would be stupid. I mean, like it wouldn't be a good fit for someone to come and ask you to do something that's
no, totally not
something.
Yeah, like why wouldn't you just go to someone else who's like good at that style?
Well, I think there's a lot of especially when you're starting out, there's people who just do anything. Like whatever you want.
Totally.
Tell me what it is and I'll try to figure it out. So what, like, would you give how do you recommend that people go about getting, and that's not like an easy straightforward answer obviously, but like how do you get to that position?
Well, it's just like when I started, right? It was easy at first because I was a kid and I didn't have to worry about paying rent or paying bills or anything like that. So especially when I was doing artwork for hardcore bands and shit like that, it was always cool stuff. So they would have their ideas about what they wanted, and sometimes I liked it and sometimes I didn't, but like it was still artwork for a hardcore band, or at the very least like a death metal band or an emo band or something, like it was always within the realm of a cool musical project. And then when I got out into the real world and I started freelancing, and I worked at two small agencies together for less than a year, and then I was back out on my own. That's when I was just like, I'll literally do anything for anyone. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I'll figure out how to do it, just because I needed the work and I needed to get out there. And I did that for maybe like 4 or 5 years, and trying to pepper in my own style here and there, until it kind of caught on. And then at one point I just kind of said, fuck it. And I was like, I'm just going to put up a book of my work, the stuff that I like and the stuff that I want to do. And that's kind of when that whole like hand lettering, handcrafted thing really took off. So I think it was like that culmination of being fed up with just being everything for everybody and never being special.
Right.
And then just being like, well, this is what makes me special. And like, I'll put it out into the world. And if somebody likes it, then they'll know that like, this is what I truly care about. And that's really what started to take hold for me. And that's where I took off and ran with it.
Right. I mean, I guess it's something I hear a lot like filmmakers and stuff, or like, video producers. It's like, if you want to get hired for a certain style of work, you have to do that style of work, whether or not 100%. You're getting paid for it. So
100%,
because no one's going to hire you if they're not seeing it,
Well, that's what I tell like students and shit like that too. When they reach out, they're like, well, how do I get started? How do I make it so people know that I do this, or blah, blah, blah. And I'm always just like, do a self-initiated project. Like,
yes.
If like whether it's real or fake, like make your own clothing line, or
like spec work.
Just do spec work. Like literally do anything for free if they'll let you, just so you can show off what kind of skills that you have, and then use that as kind of like a self-promotional tool to just be like, look at what I can do. And like literally, like I still do that to this day. Like whoever will let me do something that I haven't done before that I want to do, I'll just be like, listen, I'll throw it in for free. It's as long as if you guys are cool with it, let me do it. And 9 times out of 10 people say yes.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine why they wouldn't.
Yeah, right. Like like it's just like, oh, free work, sure.
Right. So I noticed, so you mentioned Hulu. I think I noticed you did some work for that show Run, was it, or that movie Run?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. How does that come up? Well, I don't know. This is a silly question, but like, how do you get a client like Hulu, or that kind of work? Because like, let me back up. Do you do a lot of work for like broadcast or not, or like film? Because I know that's obviously a little different than doing something maybe for Nike, or maybe it's not. Maybe right. I'm not understanding.
It's the question I always used to ask like years ago. Is like, well, how the hell do you get that work? Like I used to buy books all the time on small agencies or studios that made a name for themselves. And there was this one book that I got, and it's these two guys from Europe, and they're just like, they had a pretty well-known studio, and I was just like, they were like, oh, this is how our studio came to be. So I bought the book. This is when I was in college too. So I buy the book. I go home, I read it cover to cover, and it's like literally, it's just like, well, in Europe, we were like this, and we used to design, and we had fun, and we said, let's go to America. So we went to New York City, and we rented a studio. So right away, I'm just like, how the fuck do you do that? Like, it's really expensive,
Right.
So they're just like, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, we rented the studio, and then we started working with Volkswagen and doing this, and I was like, yo, like there are steps missing here.
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, it was like, if I could map it out exactly, I would say I started doing local hardcore bands and local businesses in high school. In college, it was the bigger bands who actually had budgets to do like cool packaging and tour posters and merch packages and shit like that. And then after that, it was local and national companies that just like low to mid-level type things, where it's just like, you get a lead, you follow a lead, you cold call. And this was also, like early-ish internet days, where I'm still like, I was calling up publishing companies like, hey, I'm a designer. Do you guys need someone to design books? Like, just like doing shit like that. And everyone would say no, but every now and again you get you kind of hook a fish. And then one of the things we did actually was start a clothing company. And that was like, it was like a t-shirt company, whatever. And we actually, I'll back up for a second. So my partner, Matt Gorton, he used to play guitar in the band Antarabe. We had a design studio going, and one of the things that we did was we made bootleg Lost t-shirts, like the TV show Lost.
Okay.
And we were just like, oh, like fuck it, like it's like holiday season time. Like we're making these bootleg t-shirts, and we put up like a small website that just sold these, and we blasted them out to a couple of the bigger blogs. And this is like when social media wasn't really a thing yet, but blogs were kind of like taking off.
Right.
And a bunch of blogs posted it, and we sold a shit ton of these t-shirts. So it was cool, but like, you know, we definitely got a cease and desist from Disney from it.
Yeah.
But it was like one of those things where we're like, oh shit, if we can make these cool t-shirts and put them online, we could start making some real money. So the guys who all the websites that posted these things were just like, if you guys have any other projects, send them over, we'll put them up. So we started a clothing company, and they started putting them up, and we started getting traction. People started buying them, and then it was like they liked the design. So that's kind of like, I was like, oh, okay, if you like these designs, check out these designs. And little by little, you know, those t-shirts started to grab hold a little bit. The company was called CXXVI, and it became popular enough that we would have to go to trade shows, and we ended up selling to like all the high-end boutiques, but also like Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom's and shit like that. And that was kind of one of the first major footholds that we had.
Okay.
That kind of ended in a rough, you know, like fiery crash and burn type of way due to a, you know, bad money type of thing. But we didn't know what we were doing, and just kind of like crumbled in our hands. And then from there I decided, okay, like I see like there's like that better world is there. Like I can almost touch it. And people who worked at agencies and shit like that saw those t-shirts, because it was like, you know, it was the early days of sharing on the internet and the blog posting and all that stuff. So they would see like, oh, I like this t-shirt that Uncrate is posting or something like that. So they would click in and be like, oh, Matt and John designed these and whatever. So like my name started to really, you know, penetrate into people's heads that were into visual stuff. So then they would, you know, email and be like, hey, would you be interested in working on this? Like not knowing that I ran a design studio for years before that. Like they were just like, oh, he's the guy that designs the t-shirts for that brand I saw on a blog.
Okay.
So it would just be like, okay, yeah. And then again, like it was all about like relationships. Then I like making friends. So it's like I'm on the phone with so-and-so from this ad agency. And then, you know, we're on the phone for 20 minutes just bullshitting about like, I don't know, like the Yankees game or like some whatever, you know?
Right.
And then you become friendly, and they're like, hey, John, I got this other thing. You want to do this? And, you know, little by little, it's just, you know, grabbing this, grabbing that. And I never say no to anything, like ever. So even like a little bullshit job or whatever would turn into something a lot bigger at some point. And then, you know, like for Hulu, for example, I forget how I got hooked up with this, but there was a digital agency out in LA who was doing some logo work for, I don't even remember what it was. It was something like whatever thing. They didn't use it. They just needed me to come in and just draw some extra ones for them, because they had to promote. They had to put like 30 logos into a proposal for this client. So they were like, I was just like a hired gun. They were like, hey, just can you draw like 15 logos for us? So I did that. And the woman who worked there ended up leaving and taking a job as a creative director at Hulu. And she called me up one day. She was like, hey, do you want to work on some like logo stuff for us? And I said, yes, absolutely. So it's literally just like people remembering they had like a good experience and just being like, oh, we should call John, you know? And that's how every single stepping stone has essentially gone for me to get to, you know, Hulu or Netflix or Nike or AT&T or whatever. It's basically like, oh, you know, I like John's work. I heard good things about him. And I'm never addicted to anybody, because it's just it's a small world, you know? And
that's a real good tip.
Yeah. It's just like, but it's easy to be friendly too. And even with the people who like wrong you, like I'll definitely like, you know, go in the other room and scream my head off at my wife and just be like, can you believe this shit? You know, like whatever. But then I'll go back and write an email and be like, you know, I disagree.
Yeah.
But, you know, so it's like the relationships I think are the most important thing. And that's what helped the most, I think.
Yeah. That's crazy. I think for some, it's partially because where my head's at right now. the Hulu thing jumped out at me. I was like, oh fuck, Hulu, that's impressive. Like
Yeah.
really, Nike and fucking all these other companies you just listed are just as impressive. I'm just like, my mindset right now is in that whole like that world. But you also
you know what the funny thing is though is that like, so here's a good example too. I've done the branding and stuff for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the past 3 years.
I was just gonna ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been their kind of like consulting creative director for the past 3 years. And from the outside looking in, you look at the sports world and the amount of money that goes into all this stuff, and you're just like, wow, whoever is working on all this stuff must be the greatest. Like literally every position you would imagine would be the greatest at what they do. But the weird kind of like secret of the sports world is that they like are hiring kids right out of college for like pennies to just come in and just work them to death, and then they just let them go. And some of these teams will have like one creative person, and that's it. And they have to do all the social stuff, all the billboards, all the tickets, all the marketing, all the email blasts, like everything. And it's like an intense job. And a lot of these people get burned out so fast that they go into sports and then they're done. And it's a really crazy industry, like sports design. So like you look at it like this is like this holy grail, like, oh my God, imagine what it would be like to work for like a basketball team or a baseball team or something. But it's actually like a grueling process where it's almost like thankless, because like the real heroes in that world are the players, not like the creative people. Like nobody gives a shit about them, even though like literally everyone is wearing a hat or a jersey or a jacket or a t-shirt. Like that is one of the most important things about sports. It's the merchandising. Right. And it's like, it's almost treated so like I don't know. I don't know if the owners really get it yet. It's getting closer, but it's still like not cherished the way it is in other industries.
I think they get it, and that's the problem. They get it. They know what they can get away with. Well, it's kind of like that in TV too. Unless you're the talent or you own the property, it's you have ownership. Yeah. TV, man, pays, from my experience, pays terrible. Like it's you do better in like doing like corporate video than you will working on a TV show that gets millions of eyeballs.
Right. It's like when a comedian will do like a corporate job instead of like doing like a cool like club or whatever. It's like, I do it because they pay me $20,000.
Right, exactly. And it's like you don't get that maybe the status or the pleasure of knowing that millions of people are seeing what you're doing or whatever, but like you get to pay your rent. So
and you get to do it, and you're just like, wow, I can actually relax for 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess on the flip side, you get a little bit more freedom and flexibility to take jobs that you actually want, as opposed to having to do certain jobs.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like that's the core of the whole like sellout argument, right? It's just like sometimes, like if you get a band that has like a ton of integrity and they like sign with the big label, or they do this or they do that or whatever, it's kind of like irrelevant these days. But like that whole thing is just like, yeah, well, now I got a shit ton of money and I can experiment all day for like the next year and a half, and I don't have to worry about if I have a place to live or what I have to eat.
Right. And then and then if the bands, there are some bands that still, they might get on that major or semi-major or whatever, like that next level, but they still stay true to it. Like they don't like for example, in the early 90s, I went down to New Jersey and saw Sick of It All play in a basement for like 100 kids. Or however many kids could fit in there, and it's like they didn't need to do that. I'm sure they had like they could go and play a club like or a big place for a much higher guarantee, you know what I mean? But they wanted to, because they're trying to keep that. They know what got them there, and I think that's kind of the key is to remember. And I
think it's also kind of like the process of getting there is the thing that you love. Like it's cool to be able to be, and I mean, it's lucky to be able to get to the point where you're like, I can make a good living on this, and I can have a family, and I can, have a mortgage and shit like that. But like without the struggle, like you can't appreciate any of it, like that whole like playing basements to 10 kids or like even like playing shows where the only people who are watching you are the other bands, like without that struggle, like you don't appreciate the fact that like when people show up, you could just be like, oh, I actually made something out of nothing. And I think that's the most fulfilling part of the whole thing.
It's so true, dude. It's funny because someone just yesterday posted a video of the first 10-Year Fight's first show, and I could only watch like a song and a half because it was so painful. And I remember the experience, just like of just people like they didn't. I thought they were gonna like hate on it, but they weren't hating on it, but they were just kind of standing and watching. You know what I mean? And you know how that what you want is a hardcore band is people knowing the words and singing and dancing, and like they just kind of were standing and watching, not knowing what to do. And it was like when people started to like react and really get it, like you appreciate that so much more. Like if like sometimes bands play in their first show and people go crazy, and I'm just how does that fucking happen? Like and like there's no way they're appreciating this the way that they should.
Oh yeah. It's so funny. Like at the beginning of the quarantine, like I had been looking for these videotapes of my old bands for years and years, and I knew it was buried in my parents' basement somewhere, and my mom found it. And I bought one of those like VHS converters to like USB.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was my old band, like my high school band. Like I was in a band after that actually ended up doing a lot more and playing in front of way more kids and all that. But it was never, it was during like the early 2000s too, where hardcore was in a weird place.
Yeah.
So we were like more of like a metalcore band or whatever, and it was like the hardcore and the metalcore worlds kind of like separated, and it was like kind of like bad vibes at that time. It wasn't like positive at all. Like everyone was just like hating on each other constantly.
So everything was black, like black t-shirts and it just like it wasn't the hardcore scene that I grew up in. It was just like this other thing. Like it felt like hardcore was dead, but we still loved it and we're holding on to it. But we also like sounded like Prayer for Cleansing, so it wasn't like we didn't sound like 10-Yard Fight, Right. Well, And I hear like American Nightmare was pretty much like American Nightmare and Hope Conspiracy and all those.
Right.
That was that whole era.
Yeah, and that was like it felt like it like separated for us. So like I found this video of my old band, and I'm talking like I don't think I could even drive to the venue, but it was like packed in with like maybe like, I don't know, 80 to 100 kids into a place that probably should only have held 50. Yeah. And I'm watching it, and there's like just kids diving over each other and people sing. And when I think back to my bands, like especially like the later times, there weren't a lot of like sing-alongs and shit like that because we were more of a metal band than anything else. Yeah. And like seeing the old band that was just like a hardcore band and seeing all that, I was just like, that memory was it was like the just see like knowing that it was captured, no matter how like dumb or like bad it was, it just felt like so like it felt like so right, like it was just like it just brings me so much joy to just be like not a care in the world, just like yelling and screaming, everyone's smiling, people are just like jumping on top of each other, and like life was good.
Yeah, I mean I would much rather play, us, not that I could play a big place, but like sometimes you see bands that play these places that they're way too big. Like, maybe they can play for like a huge amount of people, but there's a barrier, and like there's a lot of people, but there's still not enough. It's not packed. You know what I mean? Yeah, whereas like I would so much rather see a band in a small place and have it just be packed. Like, it's just so much more fun.
So much more fun. Like I remember every show that I had the most fun at were the ones that I was most terrified at because I couldn't breathe because it was so hot or something.
Yeah, like the walls were like dripping with like condensation.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's like that Sick of It All show I went to was like that. It was crazy, and the ceiling was like, I mean, it was a New Jersey basement, so I mean, I think my head almost hit the ceiling, and I'm only 5'10", so it's it was crazy. But
dude, those were always the best show, and they were always like it was either the middle of the summer and it was 95 degrees and you're packed in a basement, or it was the middle of the winter and it was 10 degrees and you're packed in a basement, and either way you're coming out like uncomfortable and sick.
Yeah, and especially like in the winter you come out and you're dying, and you just have like a drenched t-shirt on or something, and then you come out and you're freezing because it's 20 degrees out. But
I'll tell you though, I don't miss that. That shit sucked.
yeah, that's. I wanted to ask, I wanted to go back because we were talking about t-shirts and bands and stuff, and it occurred to me, and this isn't a new thought, but can we just acknowledge how genius of like the band t-shirt, like how genius that is? Like,
oh yeah,
I mean, think you're getting people to pay you to advertise for your, I mean, and it's not just bands, just in general, but like whoever came up with that idea is a fucking genius. I mean,
it's the greatest thing in the world. It's the walking billboard is the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's not a new, I'm sure I'm not the first one to have thought of this, obviously, but like every once in a while I think about it and it just blows my mind that people like pay to advertise shit.
Well, it's also when you really get into it and you look at like, especially like the highest end brand t-shirt you can imagine, like the ones that sell them for like $120.
Yeah.
Like they're not using any different t-shirts that like the basement hardcore band is using, and it's the business behind that is just like someone is going to pay you a shit ton of money for something that you spent like literally $1 on to just walk around and then further advertise your expensive brand. Like that's how I really got my business going.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know a lot of that has happened. I mean, I don't know if obviously I know you're familiar with Bridge 9, but like the way I don't know if you know that story at all, but he basically got that label off the ground through the other company he has. He's still doing it today, SULLY'S, which does all sports. You're going to hate this, but how they got their start was doing those Yankee Sucks shirts.
Yes, right.
So
you know what though? I can't even hate that because that's like you hit a nerve, and then you ride the nerve so that it pays for the rest of the shit you want to do.
Yeah. No, it was like when I heard what those dudes were doing. Did you ever hear there's a 30 for 30 audio podcast about the whole, it's called I think Yankee Sucks, because there was another group. It's pretty interesting if you're into, obviously you're in the Yankees and you're into that whole the whole rivalry deal that went down.
Totally.
And then it was all hardcore kids. So like Chris Wren, who did Bridge 9, there was another group that did they used to book shows and stuff, but they were that like Yankee Suck like classic t-shirt, they're the ones that really started doing that. And then Chris kind of splintered off to do like more of a like less negative type thing and made it more legit, whereas they went off and had this crazy like I mean, it should be a movie, like like fucking people getting shot, like drugs, like all kind, like walking around with like bags full of cash and all kinds of crazy and they were when they started off, like they were all straight edge kids, and then quickly went way off the other end. So you can just imagine, man. But you should listen to it. It's pretty interesting.
I didn't know that existed. I'm definitely gonna find that. It's such a it's one of those things too where it's like kind of like location plays a big part of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like now that like we were talking about like Spotify earlier, like that kind of takes away that specialness of the like the pride of where you're from type of thing, because everyone's just like, oh, you find me on Spotify, like it's not, you don't have to go to Boston, you don't have to be a New York kid and go to Boston wearing a Yankees hat and like have like the kids at the show like glare at you like they're gonna kick your ass after the show,
right? I don't think it was just I don't think that that wasn't that whole thing, like even I mean, there was definitely some real beef with some guys, I guess. Like, I don't know. Do you remember that, like, Slapshot had that, like, Fuck New York song?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I think that was pretty raw because of the timing of it being so close to being right after 9/11.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was thinking there, but some of that stuff, I mean, like, if you could separate it from that, like, it's kind of some funny lines, you know what I mean? And like,
oh,
it's
dude,
kinda,
absolutely. I can't hate on any of that because it's just like it's like it's passionate, you know? Like I'd rather be angry than feel nothing, you know?
And I think it's more tongue in cheek than anything. Like the people who take that shit seriously, it's kind of like those, you know, there used to be like like Salt Lake had all these crazy straight edge kids that were like carving fucking X's in people's heads and shit. It's you guys missed the point. You missed the point. Like, you know,
you took it too far.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Yeah, no, it's something I talk about all the time too, like, cause it's just like, it was always such a thing. And especially in terms of style too, like to be able to, and we were talking about this earlier, like to hear the difference, like in Long Island, right? Like you have the two counties and then like Queens and Brooklyn. So just on that island alone, like you could tell the difference between a Queens band and a Nassau band and a Suffolk band and like a South Shore band and a North Shore band, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to break it down that specific, but you could definitely tell Long Island bands in a certain era, like when we were around, I know had a certain sound, you know?
Yeah, right.
And then, you know, New York, you know, quote unquote, New York hardcore bands had a certain sound. It was more, you know, and then Boston bands usually had a certain sound. But like now I think everything's homogenized by location, but also by era. It seems like anything goes, you know, where it used to sort of go in waves, you know, like certain things would be, I'm sure certain things are still more popular, but it seems like everything just kind of like it is all in the same, like.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks because it's like it's like the double-edged sword, right? It's like you got to take the good with the bad because like now everyone can hear your music, which is awesome, but you're just like, well, like the bands in Florida were like super melodic, and then the bands in you know, Boston were super fast, or like whatever, like you don't have that weird like I went to a show with my cousin in Pennsylvania. And now I'm coming back to New York, and I want my band to sound like them, so I'm going to throw that in. And then all the kids at the shows locally are just like, "Whoa, we've never heard anything like that before." And you kind of lose it where it's like that kind of creative, you know, blending and bringing it back and forth. Now it's just like, well, I heard 4 bands on Spotify, and now my band sounds like 4 bands on Spotify. There's no like, you know,
right, and it also goes even with the style. Like there was, you could tell. Like I think like Connecticut had a certain style about like hardcore kids had a certain style of what they were wearing. Long Island kids had a certain style. Like the way kids would dance, like when we would tour.
Oh yeah.
Like people in Boston, it was just normal to just get on top of people and like walk on their heads. We went out to California and played and brought a bunch of people with us, and they started doing that, and like a fucking brawl almost went down because they just thought they were, you know, why are you walking on my fucking head? What are you doing?
Yeah, right.
And now I think it's just all, you know, and then there was like circle pitting in California, that was the big thing. Yeah. You know, and I remember like some places like kids would it was like kickboxing. And it was just like I think it's just all it all goes now, which in some sense is cool, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like you said,
it's weird to like your scene is like YouTube, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's just like, okay, well, it's like Philly and like Vancouver and friggin', I don't know, like Japan all have the same kids doing the same stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And it's like it's cool for the fact that like you can share that with people around the world from that aspect, but at the same time it's like does it hinder kind of like this like super focused stylistic development that you can then share and blend in like weird and interesting ways, you know?
Right. Dude, I don't want to keep you all night. Do you want to talk about your book at all, man? Like,
yeah, sure,
I said, sure. I picked it up. I haven't, like, it came today. So.
Oh, nice.
I'm I'm psyched to get into it, but you're going to have to tell me a little bit more about what it's about.
So it was an awesome thing that happened, right? Because it's like I was telling you, I used to buy a ton of books when I was younger because I was just obsessed. So like all the legendary designers, all the designers that were like big enough to have books or whatever, I was like, one day I would love to be able to have a book of my work. But, like then it was like, okay, this is essentially people that are retired have books of their works.
Right.
So, I didn't expect to have one this soon in my life. And a guy who I used to work with, I forget which publisher he was at, but we used to do covers together. He moved over to Abrams, my publisher, and was just like, hey, he was like, you want to do a book of your work? And I was like, I would love to. I said, but aren't I too young? And he's like, no, he's like, I want to do away with kind of that old, like, you're dead and buried and here's your friggin' headstone worth of, work or whatever. He's like, I think it would be better if you could do a book at, every 10 years of your career or something. So you could see the difference and you can kind of like, and the people who are buying the books can, add to their collection. It's like a different vibe instead of just like, here's like the be all and end all of an artist, So I was into that, but I didn't know. I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, just like a picture book? Like, how is this book supposed to be anything? And it took us just like almost 2 years to like settle on a concept of what the book was going to be. Cause I was just like, what am I going to like write about myself in the third person? Like, isn't that going to be weird? Like, I don't want to sound like an asshole, And he was like, no, don't do that. He's like, make it what you want, And we just went back and forth and back and forth. And he was like, what if it's more of like it's funny too. Like, his name is John Gall. He's an awesome artist himself. But he kept suggesting these things, and I was like, I don't know. And I would like blow it off, and I'd be like, I'll come up with something else. But then eventually come back to the ideas that he was giving me. And he was like, what if it was more like journalistic, where you kind of like talk about your inspiration or where you kind of came from, and then show examples of the work. So the book has, I don't know, it's like 12 or 13 chapters, whatever. I haven't looked at it in so long because I'm just like, once I was done, I was like, I don't want to look at it anymore. And each one is just like the chapter is like the inspiration. So it's like something that's affected the way that I work. So like, it's like New York, there's a chapter of hardcore. There's a chapter of like horror movies. There's a chapter of baseball, and then there's like a blurb about it, just like a page. And then there's a bunch of projects that all stem from that inspiration. So whether it's like directly related to the thing, or if the thing like has influenced that particular thing in a very obvious way, or obvious once you kind of know that it's done by that. That's kind of what the book's about. And then I got to design it too, which was cool, because a lot of times it's basically just like, here's my work, and then you hand it off to a book designer and they do whatever they want with it. But I got to design it. So
yeah, it seems like that would be a weird that seems like that would be a weird thing for you to have to do.
Yeah, it's super weird. But like, I went all out and I made the pages black. So I was talking to him. I was like, can we print on black paper? And he was like, no. He's like, because if we're gonna do like little type and all this kind of stuff, he's like, it's just never gonna. It's all the holes and the letters are gonna close, and you'll never be able to read it, and blah blah blah. So that book, actually, this is like, I love this fact. That book is, all the pages are flooded with black ink. So anywhere where there's white, it's just like the color of the paper. So that book is essentially as much ink as you can fit into a book of that size.
Dude, that must have been expensive to print.
It was, well, the publisher did it, so I was like, whatever you guys want to spend on this, go for it.
Wow, that's amazing that you got them to go for that, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was all into it. He was like, he's like, you want to do it? Let's do it. And the thing is that it was actually cheaper to flood the book than it was to do like I don't know, like gold foil on the cover or some shit like that.
Okay. Yeah. That's crazy. That's awesome.
I mean, and it was like a really crazy process too, because like I wanted to go back and like put like my life's work in there. And the most we could do was like 300 pages or something. And then when you actually sit down and look at what you've done in your life, it's like, well, that's embarrassing, but also like, holy shit, I forgot about this, and this. And then it was basically the amount of time the majority of the time I spent was really just cutting down all the work to be like the things that I thought would work best in the book. And that just took so long because you're talking about like over 20 years worth of stuff to go through. So it was a process, but it was fun, man. It was like interesting and like really weird to sit there and like, look at myself in that way, and just like have to like, oh, who am I? It's so stupid.
Well, I would imagine the seeing the progression, it was pretty cool too. Like,
yeah. But the other thing is too, is like, I just tried so hard not to make it sound like an ego thing, because like, oh, here's a book about me. Like I felt like such a dickhead, like just doing something like that. But at the same time, I'm just like, well, it's like still like a promotional item,
right?
Like I'm still working. Like here's my work for the past, X amount of years. Like, if you like it, come and find me. I'm still doing it.
Right. I mean, the whole idea is there's like you said, there's an inspirational as well as, I guess, educational in a way aspect to it too. I mean, other than just looking at pretty pictures, I think that's why someone's going to pick something like this up. They want to know, how the fuck do I get to where he's at?
Yeah. And it's, the funny thing is too, is that I used to and still do the same thing. Like all of my favorite books are all of designers doing the same thing, and it's just, there's another studio called House Industries, which is huge. And those guys, I fell in love with those guys early on because they were into lettering, and there was also Jeremy Dean worked with them too, and he did a whole bunch of hardcore stuff. And I was like, wait, these guys are like really good designers into lettering, and they know what hardcore is. And it was just like their books are like the template for all design books ever. And I was just like, if I could just make it like 10% as cool as that, I'd be happy.
Yeah. Those guys, I remember my friend John was telling me about those guys back like in the 90s. Isn't that when they started? And like he was like, it's just these hardcore dudes that make fonts. I'm like, I'm not sure if I even knew what a font was at that point. Yeah. But I was like, oh. And I remember like, he would show me, and it was just all these crazy, like, they looked like hardcore flyer fonts, yeah. And then,
and I remember the first book I got of theirs where it had like a whole bunch, there was like I don't know, like 10 pages in a row of just like hardcore flyer stuff. I was like, holy shit. I was like, it can be done. Yeah. There's a world out there for us.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I guess, like you were saying, you used to go looking for these books. You would, I'm guessing you would be pretty bummed if some of those artists never did those books, like.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, absolutely. So because those are the things that I cherish the most out of everything is those books. Those are like my favorite things.
Right. I definitely look at these things for inspiration. Like I always have, so I think you got to look at it as less of an ego thing and more of a in terms of something that's actually putting something in the world of substance that's going to help people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think where the ego thing weirds me out a little bit is just like you have to come to terms with the fact that people like your stuff and that it's more than just because I'm always in the mindset of just like even today, like I've been doing it so long and I've been around. I know that my work has so much more value than I ever thought it could have, but I still think about how much time I spent like laying on the ground, like drawing in sketchbooks, and how no one saw it and it was nothing and never was anything. And, like you sit here and I still like for the most part sit in a room by myself and just draw. And it's really like disconnected way of kind of working. But, I guess everyone kind of does that today, but, and then to put it out there and, people like it and people care about it. And then there are people that, like it so much that they rip it off and they steal it and shit like that. It's weird to just have that mindset of just like, oh, I guess I'm not just like a nobody, just kind of in a room by myself. Like, I guess there is some value to what I do.
Yeah. Well, that's just the thing, man. Like you're really good at what you do.
Oh, thanks.
And almost, what comes with that is, it's with great power comes great responsibility. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like in order, I think, to keep that ego in check, what you do is you share it with people and try to help people along their journey. And it seems like that's what you're doing.
I try to, like I always try to help out however I can. And it's like, like you get like kids like DMing me or emailing me or something. And they're like, hey, I'm a student and I have a question, blah, 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 blah. And I never not answer anyone. I always answer whoever emails or texts or DMs, whatever. And it's so funny, like sometimes when people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that you responded. I'm like, well, who the fuck do you think I am? Like I'm not like John Lennon or some shit. Like,
well, no, man.
Why wouldn't I?
I can attest to that. You responded, I emailed you and you responded, pretty quickly. And there's some guys that you hear and they talk a big game about that. And they'll say, I respond to all of my emails, and sometimes it might take me a while, but I do get back to you, just and it's like, I don't know, do you? Because I've tried emailing a few people, and it's been quite a while. Maybe it was my approach, I don't know, but like, there's other people who you would think like, how the fuck can they respond to everyone? I mean, like, I'm sure you're familiar with Seth Godin.
Oh yeah.
That dude legit responds like he's one dude who responded to me in like 5 minutes and had no kidding. There was no reason for him to respond to me. You know what I mean? I was just like, right. Hey, I like your work. You're like, if you get a chance, check out this thing I did. And he responded almost instantly. And it's like,
that's awesome.
And on top of that, it was the day before he was getting ready to launch a book, like the next day. Yeah. So think about that. Like, how busy is that guy? You know what I'm saying? And he responds to everyone. So
yeah, especially like the day before. That's like when everyone's emailing you, just like, you need to be doing this. You got to do this.
I felt bad. Yeah, I felt bad because I didn't realize that. Yeah, I would have bothered him then at the worst possible time. So he legit, he's one of those people who he says he does, and he really does. So
well, I think it's one of those things too, where it's like, do you love what you do? Yes or no? Because there are the people who don't respond, who like, I think they hit a certain point, and then they fall in love with the idea of who they are to some people, and that's enough for them. And then they're like, yeah, that's what I wanted to reach. I just wanted to make sure that I could validate what I thought of myself, and then that's it. But people like me or you or Seth or whatever, like, you love what you do so much. You're just like it doesn't matter. I could be the greatest thing in the world. Like, this is just what I love to do. Why would I not want to do it?
Right. And I can imagine, like, certain people, like, they must get flooded. So I would completely understand if they can't respond to everyone's email, but don't go around telling people that you do, because that's the part that get, that's the part that seems disingenuous. It's
like if you try to email The Rock to be on your show next week or something like that. It's just like, guy's fucking busy.
Right. Exactly. But like, dude, getting back to the giving back thing. So like, you do a lot of shit. Like, it seems like I know you have some courses. You do public speaking. Is that correct? All this stuff. Like, go through the list of shit you do, because I'm just on a normal year, in a non-COVID year.
In a non-COVID year, I mean, like, well, like, okay, so I run a design studio, right?
Yeah.
And we do branding, and it's, for the most part, so the way that I run it, it's not like a traditional studio. So for the most part, it's me. And then when a project comes in that I need help with, I have kind of like a small network of people that I pull in for whatever. So I have like I have a designer that I work with on a fairly regular basis who will do like, stuff I can't do, animation or stuff that I don't have time to do, things like that. I have like a web developer, I have a photographer, video person, like all sorts of shit like that. But for the most part, I'm doing the majority of the work, or at least the majority of the creative direction and stuff. So I'll do that. I'll I could be, in one day I could be designing logos. I could be doing illustration work for an ad campaign. I could be designing a font. I could be creative directing, like a photo shoot or a video shoot, or be at a photo shoot. Like when I worked with the Buccaneers, like I would literally do I would design fonts for them. I designed all the billboard work that would be around Tampa or like on the side of the stadium, all the bunting that goes along the field, like all that shit. I would direct the photo shoots and be there with the players and the photographers and do all that kind of shit. And then like I'll speak at conferences. When I can, I'll do a podcast on my own. It's not that regular, but like it's, I do it as regularly as I can. And then, there's always like merch or like selling the books or selling shirts or whatever, like all that kind of shit, or like the classes or like literally whatever I can get my hands on, I'm doing. And if I can squeeze it into a day, I'll find a way to do it,
Right. You have some Skillshare classes? Is that?
Yes. I had a handful of Skillshare classes. But the economics of it started to balance out of the favor of what they originally promised me. So that's when I started doing my own classes.
Yeah. I heard.
So I did.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say, I heard something about like last year, they kind of changed their model or something where it was.
Yeah. When they approached me, it was like early on, and they were like, we want to get some designers on here to start, to bring credibility to the platform. So it was like me and a few other people that people have heard of, whatever. So I was like, yeah, sure. They were super nice. They sent a whole video crew up and they helped like set up the whole thing. I barely had to do anything except like do some drawings and like talk about why you should do a certain thing. And at the time, it was like a 50-50 split. So I was like, cool, I'll do a 50-50 split. That makes total sense. You guys are putting in the time. You got the platform. I'm doing this, whatever. And then the next course, it was like, well, now it's like 75-25, but we'll do this or whatever. Okay. And then it was like one of those things. It was like, well, you get like, 20% of your course's revenue or so. And then it just like started changing and changing. I was like, okay, I'm good. Like obviously people are interested. I was like, let me go do my own thing, my own way, on my own terms. And then people can, if they want to take it, great. And if not, whatever. So it's obviously it's a smaller audience than a place like Skillshare has, but like it's way more quality. It's like a fuller, it's like straight up like full college course,
Right.
So it's just like better off that way, I think.
And you have Skillshare brings obviously maybe a bigger audience, but I think you have a more direct audience. There's definitely people looking. I mean, that's the reason they wanted you, because there's people that are going to be attracted because it's you.
Right. And it's not just like, and not that I wouldn't want like a random person who's just, oh, here's a course on this. Like, that seems interesting. Here's my $20 for the year and I'm going to learn how to do this. And I'm going to learn how to, cook and knit and whatever. Not that I don't want that person, but like the courses that I do on my own are like so in depth. It's for someone who really like wants to make a change and like put the effort in to do it. So I appreciate that more too, because that's like something I would do with someone else,
Right, definitely. I almost, I sitting there talking to you. I was listening to some of you. I listened to your last podcast yesterday, I think. So yeah. And,
oh, nice.
You guys were talking about, what the hell were you talking about? You were talking about The Irishman.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I can't agree more about the fact that they digitally made them look younger, but when they were like fighting and trying to move, they still looked old. That was the weirdest shit.
Oh, it was horrible. It took you right out of it.
Yeah. And I think, I think you had mentioned something about it just being way too long, and maybe they should have made it like a series or something. I think that was right too. But yeah, I wanted to mention like, the podcast is good, man. Like,
oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But you got to do more of them, I think. Because...
Oh my God, dude, it is. It's so funny too, because like with the whole COVID thing and the quarantine, I was lucky enough to have a few like long-term projects at the beginning of the year where they didn't, it was like the Buccaneers was one of the big ones. So like, it's not like the team was going to go away. So I was still busy throughout the whole quarantine, where a lot of people either were getting laid off or didn't have work at the time or whatever. And then the people who were working like triple time. So like for the entirety of the quarantine, I've been working like 22-hour days, like Jesus. 7 days a week, because it's just like everyone's going so hard to keep things afloat. So like, obviously I'm not going to slow down either because I don't want shit to dry up and go away. So I've been going hard too. So it's been like the most like so my designer, who's the co-host on that, we're just like, okay, we're going to podcast tomorrow. Right. And then like tomorrow comes and goes and we're just like, yo, what happened? It's like, I don't know. I fell asleep on my desk. And I'm like, yeah, I fell asleep on my couch. Like, we're just like dead by the time that we're ready to do it.
Yeah. You guys, I think you mentioned that sometimes like you get to like, you know, you'll wake up and just start doing shit and 3 o'clock rolls around. You realize you're still in your pajamas and you haven't showered. Yeah. I hear that.
There's so many times where it's just like, holy shit. It's just like, I forgot that I didn't eat lunch, but I double forgot that I didn't even brush my teeth yet.
Yes. Yeah. Today was kind of one of those days. I definitely did not shower today. So
yeah. Especially with the kids too, like the kids being home and everything, like it like all routines go out the window. So it's just like, I used to take a shower in the morning and it's just like, fuck, man. Like I take a shower when someone finally falls asleep.
Yeah, the kids complicate things. I don't know about you, but my kids are totally remote. And,
yeah, mine too.
Wow, because I always worked from home, anyways. Yeah. So to me, it's like, right. I work from home. I don't really see people that much, anyways. It's not that big of a difference. But now my wife's working from home, and the kids are home all day, and it's just like
chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. It's chaos.
Chaos. And it's it's the funny thing too is because like. I love that they're all here and that there's like constantly like someone running in, like dad, this and that and blah blah blah. Like it's awesome, but at the same time, you know how it is. Like as soon as you get interrupted, it's so hard to just go right back into what you were doing. You need like another 20 minutes to settle back into your thought process. Yeah, and then go back. It's a lot of lost time.
Yeah, the interruptions are like it's so much more than just the amount of time it takes to interrupt. Yeah, it's yes. You lose your whole flow.
Yeah. It's not like a 5 minute, like, oh, can you do, like sometimes if my wife's like, hey, can you make lunch for the kids or whatever? Like it's, sure. It might take me like 5 minutes to make a couple of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but then I'm out of it for like 10 or 15 minutes. Cause you get this, you set them up, get the drinks, get this, whatever. And then I sit back down. I'm like, what the fuck was I doing?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Shit, man. Like we've been going for almost 2 hours. I want to respect your time. I did want to ask you about clients, if you have any crazy client stories that you might want to share, or man.
There's shit, so many crazy clients. So I got one that's pretty funny.
Okay.
So I was doing design for this clothing company that their primary investor. So it was this one company. This guy ran this company called Artful Dodger, and I believe Jay-Z's company ended up buying it out. Right. So he was out of the game for a little while because I think it was like part of like a part of the agreement, non-compete. Once you sell this to me, you can't own another clothing company for like 3 years or some shit like that or whatever.
Yeah.
So he starts this new brand. And I started working with him. I was doing the branding. I was doing some T-shirt designs. It was like the whole thing. And then he got an investor, and the investor was part of the investment group that bought FUBU. Okay. So FUBU, started, I don't know, mid 90s. I want to say maybe
something like that.
No, maybe late 80s actually. Okay. It was like right like during like the whole like rap boom, like when that started and whatever. So the guys who took over were just like the most like generic, like rich old white guys, like not what you would expect from FUBU, right?
Yeah.
So they were the same investors that started putting money into this guy's company. So this guy's like, hey, come up to the office. We'll go through everything. I'll introduce you to my investment partner, and just so you get to know him, whatever. So it's like, yeah, cool. Like, sounds good. So the office was in the Empire State Building, which I grew up in New York. I never went into my entire life until I had this meeting,
Yeah.
It's like, what reason would I ever have to go in it?
Well, you weren't a tourist. I think I went in it once when I was a kid, but
yeah, like it's the only reason you would ever go in is if you're just like, hey, I'm in Manhattan. You
right.
know? Yep. So I go into the building, and in my head, I'm like, oh man, finally, this is like my favorite building of all time. Like, it's so cool to be inside of it.
Yep.
I go in the building and I go in the elevator. It's like floor 66 or something like that. The elevator opens up and there's like a big FUBU logo on it. And I'm like, holy shit. I was like, this is crazy. Like they got like the whole floor. Like this is wild. So I go in there and there's like, like cool dude, like sitting at the desk. And he's like, what's up, man? I'm like, oh, I'm here to see so-and-so. He's like, all right, sit down. So everything's just like, big leather couches, this like, loud music blasting, there's like ESPN on like a ton of TVs. Like it was like a cool hangout spot. And then someone comes and he's like, hey, John, you want to come in the back? I said, yeah, sure. So I walk in the back, and as soon as I open the door, it was like cubicles. And I was like, oh, I was like, that sucks. Yeah. So I go in the back, and all the way in the back, there was one cool room, and that's where this guy was running his thing. So I was like, okay, so we're sitting down, we're looking at all the designs, we're talking, blah, blah, blah. So he's like, so I want you to meet my partner. So I'm like, okay, cool. So like, let's see what this guy's about. So we go in and we go back into the cubicle area, and he opens up the door, and it's like the generic like CEO office, like not amazing, but like it looks like this guy's got some kind of money, right?
Yeah.
So he's on the phone. He's got like a Bluetooth headpiece in, and like I shit you not, he was like the guy who was just like, yeah, babe, yeah, we're gonna do this, babe, yeah, babe, like that.
Right,
and I'm like, oh, I was like, okay. So the guy's sitting across from me. He's like mouthing to me. He's like, I'm sorry. Like 1 minute. He'll be off the phone in 1 minute. So we sit there for, it's got to be a good 10 minutes while this guy finishes his conversation. Like no courtesy whatsoever. And then he finally hangs up, and the guy from the clothing company is like, oh, this is John, this guy I was telling you about. Oh, yeah. He's like, oh, I'm so glad you could come in. And he starts asking me these questions, and like these really random questions. And then he's like, what does your work look like again? And I'm like, like, how do I answer that? Right. So he's like, oh, and the guy from the clothing company, he's like, show me your website. So I'm like, okay, I'll show him my website. So I get up and I walk behind the desk, and the guy's like standing there and doesn't move, so that I have to like shimmy against the desk to get through.
Right.
And he's got 3 monitors set up, because I guess he was like a wannabe like stockbroker type. And and you would know because you work in video. So if you have multiple monitors, you got to set them up in a row so that when you scroll across, the mouse goes left to middle to right or whatever.
Right.
This guy didn't do that. So if you were on the middle one and you go to the right, it pops up on the left screen. It's like going all over the place. Not to mention, his resolution was like 1996 size, so it was like an 800 by 600 monitor.
Right.
So my website didn't even fit on the screen. So I pull it up and I'm like, oh, here you go. And he's not looking at it anyway.
Right.
So while I'm pulling it up and I'm trying to show him and talk to him about what I'm doing, he pulls out a putter. And he's standing there looking at me, and he just starts, practicing his little putting swing, and then actually hits a golf ball at my feet.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Like
at your feet?
Like, yeah, at my feet, like straight up like movie villain,
dude.
Just like putting at my feet. And I'm like, all right, like, what do I do in this situation? So I was just like, okay, I'm going to get off of his golf course and I'm going to go sit back in my chair. So I get out of there, and I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, I hate this fucking guy. Yeah. And I sit down, and he's like, for this line, how much would you charge? So I'm like going through, I'm like, well, it would cost this for this and this for this. And at this point, I'm well established. Like, I don't need people to like throw me a bone or tell me that like, it's going to be, you're going to be a superstar once you work with me. Like, I've been through that shit already. I knew, when a good thing is coming. So he's like, okay. He's like, well, who's your biggest client? And I'm like, I don't know, Nike. And he's like, what if I told you I'm going to do 5 times the business that Nike does? And I said, great. He's like, but you got to do this whole thing for me for like $500. And I was like, no, like, I'm just like, how about you pay what I'm telling you it costs? I'm not trying to, like, I wasn't trying to rob him or anything. Right. I just told him, like standard cost for stuff. And I was like, no, that's what it is. And he's like, okay. He's like, all right, well, we'll discuss it. So like the guy's like trying to like strong arm me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck this guy. And I walk out, and the guy from the clothing company comes out. He's like, I'll work it out. So finally, like, like we do the work or whatever. I get what I wanted for it. And then they don't pay.
I was just gonna say, I bet that's what you're saying. Yep. Throwing up all kinds of red flags. I've dealt with these on a smaller scale. Those dudes, they don't pay. Those are the ones you got to chase around for the invoice.
Yep. So I had to chase them around for the invoice. It must have taken about a year and a half, and I finally, it got to the point where they were ignoring my calls. And it was this whole thing where it's just like, yeah, come down and come and get it and we'll pay you. And every time I showed up, there was nobody there to pay. So I got my sister-in-law to go down and they let her in because they were just like, oh, this pretty little girl's coming in. Like, we'll see what she needs. And she's like, oh, I'm here to pick up Jon Contino's check. So they didn't have any choice but to give her the money.
Right.
And I had to go through this whole fucking like crazy scheme to get paid for the thing that the guy's like, I'll take care of you kind of shit, Dude. That was probably one of the worst ones.
Dude, yeah, that sounded like as you're saying it, it's like the guy was just trying to pull some alpha like power move on you to.
Oh yeah.
Just yeah, that's bullshit.
Oh yeah, I was in the whole time in my head. I'm like, fuck this guy.
Yeah. You were right. You shouldn't have even taken it if it was gonna, even for double, like. Oh
God, it wasn't worth it. And the funny thing is too, the guy was acting like such a hotshot. But you look at when I finally started to look around the office, it was like, if you went into like a Staples and they have like the office the office desks and shit in the back,
the fake TVs, and then it's just like plastic and cardboard.
That is what this guy's office looked like exactly. I'm like, because I used to work at Office Max when I was in high school. I was like, wait a second, I recognize that desk.
Yeah. Oh man, I had something kind of, well, not even remotely on this level, but like it was a much smaller place. It was an SEO company, and it was just like. Every time I'd come in, like I did a little bit of work for them, I'd come in and they would just like give me the runaround. And finally I was just like, I'm not fucking leaving until you pay me, and walked with the guy to the ATM. And it was just like I was in a hard place. Like I needed to pay my mortgage and I needed this money. But on a smaller scale, but like I can only imagine like doing, I mean, like, a company of that scale should be able to pay you, without, and they're coming to you who, already established, like, that's just insulting, man. You were way past that level of like, do this and there'll be more work down the line. Like,
I think what happens is a lot of these companies end up making so much money because they don't pay anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If there's no expenses, you keep all that money.
Yeah, so it's kind of like what you were saying about the sports industry.
Right. Yeah. So I mean that, and that's the deeper and deeper you get into the business, the more of like you're just like, oh well, everyone's a shady piece of shit. So like when you do find the people that, and that's, it goes back to like what I was talking about relationships too. Like when you find the people that are good people.
Yep.
It's like like one of the guys who's actually become a really good friend, he was the creative director over at 20th Century Fox, and he calls me up one day and he was like, hey man, he's like, I really like your stuff. I have a Day of the Dead movie coming out. He's like, would you be interested in doing, the branding and the marketing for that? And I was like, fuck yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was the Book of Life. So we started working together. We became really friendly, kept in touch. And now it's like when jobs come up, now he's at Disney because Disney bought 20th Century Fox. So when jobs come up, he's just like, John, you want to do a logo for this? And he'll throw out some crazy name and I'll be like, yeah, fuck yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like no questions asked. And then like we'll just sit on the phone for like an hour and just like bullshit about life,
Right. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. And it's, and then those are the types of people where it's just like, obviously, he's working hard, I'm working hard, and we kind of grow into the industry together. And,
yep.
Before you know it, he's at Disney now, his budgets are better. And I'm, like doing this, and I have all the experience of working on this movie and that movie, whatever. So now it's just kind of like, yeah, well, why wouldn't we work together? We're fucking old pros. We're doing this for whatever. We know how the business works. And,
you kind of came up together. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels natural,
Yeah, exactly. All right, man. Well, this was super fun conversation. I don't want to keep you any longer because we're going on 2 hours. Anything you want to, any last words? Anything you want to plug or like shout out or like?
Oh man, I don't know. Yeah, no, this was super fun. Is it like I was saying, man? Anytime that we can like talk hardcore and like it like it's related to other things, but it's like I can mention something and it's just like that reference makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
It's worth it, man. Like I'll sit here and talk for another 5 hours. Nah, man, it's fucking the end of the year, man. Like I just want everyone to go get their vaccine.
God, yeah. All right, man. Well,
Anthony, thanks for having me, man. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, it's just at least mention your website or something, man.
I mean, you could check out my studio at Contino Studio. If you want to learn how to do custom lettering, you could check out ContinoWorkshop.com. I'm in the process of trying to finish how to start a creative business. So like it's something that people who listen to this might really like. So when that comes out, that'll be on ContinoWorkshop.com too.
I'll be interested in that. I could probably use some tips.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot of stuff about taking the idea and turning it into something, and then also like when you make it legit, like do you go for like an LLC? Do you do an S corp? Do you do that kind of stuff? How do you send the invoices? What do proposals look like? Like all sorts of shit like that. Like how do you represent yourself? Like with do you have a website? Do you do all that kind of stuff? And just basically kind of like everything that goes into running a creative business that I have learned the hard way over the past 20-something years.
Right. Awesome. All right, man. That sounds great. Thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully we'll talk again another time.
I would love to. Anytime.
That was Jon Contino. Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please just reach out and let me know what you're thinking. Feel free to leave a comment or a review or a rating in iTunes or Spotify. That would be great. That helps a lot. Also, don't forget to check out the 6-part Don't Stand in Line docuseries. It's now actually available up on Vimeo on demand, so it might be a little bit easier to get that straight to your TV than through Gumroad, but it's still up on Gumroad as well, and we are working on a couple other cool ways to get that to you. You can learn more about that and everything else we're doing at codecprojects.com, CODECPROJECTS.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. See you guys next week with an old friend, legendary BMX pro and owner of Cult Bikes, Robbie Morales.